My name is Margaret Sullivan, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 72 years old, and I never thought I'd be standing here today, burying the man I'd spent 50 years of my life with. The funeral home was packed. Robert had been a beloved member of our community. A deacon at church, a volunteer at the food bank, always the first to help a neighbor in need. The flowers were beautiful, white lilies and red roses, just like he would have wanted. Our daughter Sarah held my hand on one side, our son Michael on the other. The grandchildren sat in the row behind us, sniffling quietly. Robert and I had built a life together. We'd raised 2 beautiful children in the same house we bought as newlyweds. We'd weathered storms, literally and figuratively. When the factory closed and Robert lost his job in '98, we ate beans and rice for 6 months until he found work again. When I had my cancer scare in 2010, he never left my side through every treatment, every terrifying doctor's appointment. But as I sat there staring at his casket, memories I'd pushed aside for years began creeping back in like unwelcome ghosts. The late-night phone calls he'd take outside. "Just work, honey," he'd say with that easy smile of his. The business trips that seemed to multiply in his last few years before retirement. New clients in different states, he'd explained. The credit card statement I'd found tucked away in his desk drawer 2 years ago, showing purchases in cities he'd never mentioned visiting. When I'd asked about it, he'd gotten defensive, the only time in our marriage I'd seen him truly angry with me. "A man's entitled to some privacy, Margaret," he'd said, using my full name like a wall between us. I'd let it go. I'd trusted him. 50 years of marriage. Didn't that earn him the benefit of the doubt? Now, sitting at his funeral, I wondered if I'd been a fool. Pastor Jenkins was mid-sentence, talking about Robert's generosity and spirit. When the back doors of the funeral home creaked open, everyone turned to look. Funerals are intimate affairs. You don't just walk in late unless you're family or very close to the deceased. The woman who entered was striking. She couldn't have been more than 35, with glossy dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and wearing a black dress that looked expensive. She carried a bouquet of white roses, Robert's favorite flower, though I'd always preferred lilies. Something about her confident stride made my stomach drop. She walked down the center aisle, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, and every eye in that room followed her. She didn't look nervous or apologetic for her late entrance. She looked like she belonged there. When she reached the front, she stopped directly beside the casket, placed her hand on it gently, and closed her eyes for a moment. I watched her lips move in what might have been a prayer, then she turned to face the crowd. "I'm sorry for interrupting," she said, her voice steady and clear, "but I had to be here. My name is Elena Martinez and—" She paused, her eyes finding mine. "I'm Robert's wife, too." The silence that followed was deafening. Then it erupted. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened so hard I thought my bones might break. Michael shot to his feet. "What the hell are you talking about?" he shouted. Murmurs rippled through the pews like a wave. I heard Mrs. Henderson from the church choir gasp. I saw Robert's brother Tom half rise from his seat, his face red with anger, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at this woman, this stranger, who had just blown my entire life apart with 6 words. Pastor Jenkins tried to restore order, but Elena wasn't finished. "I know this is shocking," she continued, projecting her voice over the chaos. "But I loved Robert too. We were married 7 years ago in Las Vegas. We have a daughter together. She's 6 years old." "That's impossible," Sarah shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "My father would never, wouldn't he?" Elena's eyes swept the room, and I saw something in them, not malice, but pain. "He traveled for work, didn't he? Business trips, conferences, new clients to meet?" My blood turned to ice. "Those were his exact words, his exact excuses. I have proof," Elena said quietly, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a folder and held it up. "Marriage certificate, photos, our daughter's birth certificate, with Robert's name as the father." Tom, Robert's brother, pushed forward. "Let me see that," he demanded. Elena handed over the folder without hesitation. Tom's hands shook as he opened it, his eyes scanning the documents inside. The color drained from his face. "Oh my God," he whispered. These look real." The room erupted again. Half the people present started shouting questions at Elena while the other half surrounded me. asking if I knew anything about this, if I was okay, offering comfort I couldn't absorb. I felt like I was underwater, drowning, watching everything happen from a great distance. 50 years. 50 years I'd given this man. I'd raised his children, kept his house, stood by him through thick and thin, loved him with everything I had, and all that time he'd been living another life. With another woman, another family, the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I bent forward, struggling to breathe, and Sarah wrapped her arms around me. "Mom, Mom, it's okay," she kept saying, but it wasn't okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. "She's lying," Michael declared, his voice breaking. "She has to be lying. This is some kind of scam." "I'm not lying," Elena said softly. "I wish I was. I loved him. Our daughter loved him. He spent every other week with us, told me he traveled for business. I didn't know about—" She looked at me, and for the first time, her composure cracked. "I didn't know about you. Any of you. Not until he died." The funeral ended in chaos. Pastor Jenkins suggested we adjourn and continue the service another day. But honestly, I don't remember much after that moment. People helped me to the car. Sarah drove me home, while Michael stayed behind, arguing with Elena and demanding answers. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, I went to Robert's study, a room he'd always kept locked when he was alive, claiming he needed privacy for his business papers. I'd respected that. God help me. I'd respected so many boundaries that I should have questioned. Now I tore through that room like a woman possessed. I found his lockbox in the back of the closet, behind old tax returns. I'd never had the combination before, but I tried our wedding anniversary. It opened. Inside, I found a second cell phone, bank statements for an account I'd never known existed, credit card bills showing purchases in Phoenix where Elena said she lived, receipts from a jewelry store for a diamond bracelet I'd never received, and photos. So many photos. Robert with Elena at the Grand Canyon, both of them grinning at the camera. Robert holding a tiny baby with dark hair in his nose. Robert at a child's birthday party, a little girl with Elena's eyes sitting on his lap, blowing out candles on a cake that said, "Happy 5th birthday, Isabella." Isabella. My husband's other daughter, a little girl I'd never known existed. I found cards too. Birthday cards, Valentine's Day cards, all signed Love, Elena, and Isabella. One caught my eye, a Father's Day card with a child's handwriting inside. "Dear Daddy, I miss you when you're gone. Come home soon. Love, Bella. Come home soon," as if Phoenix was his home. As if we, Sarah, Michael, me, were the other family. The interruption in his real life. I sat on the floor of his study, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, and something inside me broke. Not just my heart, my entire understanding of who I was, who we were, what our marriage had meant. Every memory was tainted now. Every anniversary dinner, every quiet Sunday morning, every time he'd held me and told me he loved me. Had he been thinking of her? Had he compared us? Had he wished he was somewhere else? When Sarah found me at dawn, still sitting on the floor, she didn't say anything. She just sat down beside me and wrapped her arms around me, while I finally let myself cry. The next few days were a blur of lawyers and investigators. Michael hired a private detective, determined to get to the bottom of everything. Tom, Robert's brother, started making calls to family members and old colleagues, trying to piece together when the double life had started. The picture that emerged was devastating in its completeness. Robert had started traveling more frequently about 8 years ago. He'd told me it was for work, new clients, expanding territories. In reality, he'd taken a second job in Phoenix, working remotely part-time, creating a reason to be away from both families. He'd been meticulous. 2 phones, 2 addresses, 2 completely separate lives. He'd used business trips to cover visits to Elena. He'd used our family vacations, the ones he'd started skipping in recent years, claiming work was too busy, to spend time with Isabella. The bank account I'd found had nearly $50,000 in it. Money he'd been setting aside from his salary without my knowledge. The investigator found rental agreements for a 2-bedroom apartment in Phoenix where Elena and Isabella lived. Robert had been paying the rent. "He was planning to leave you," the investigator told me gently, sitting in my living room a week after the funeral. We found emails on his phone. He told Elena he was going to tell you everything after he retired. That he wanted to spend his golden years with her and Isabella. I felt numb. But he died first. Yes, ma'am. The heart attack. He died at Elena's apartment. She's the one who called 911. But when she called your house to inform you, and Sarah answered, Elena realized for the first time that he'd been lying to her too. Sarah, who'd been sitting beside me, spoke up.
So she knew before the funeral?
She found out the day before. She saw his obituary online, saw the family he'd left behind. She was as shocked as you were. I thought about that. Elena, reading about me, about Sarah and Michael, realizing she'd been deceived too. Finding out the man she loved, the father of her child, had an entire first family he'd never mentioned. Why did she come to the funeral? I asked quietly. The investigator hesitated. You'd have to ask her that yourself. But if I had to guess, she wanted answers. Same as you. But there was something else. Something that had been nagging at me since that horrible day at the funeral. The marriage certificate, I said slowly. Is it real? The investigator's expression changed. That's an interesting question, Mrs. Sullivan. 3 days later, I drove to Phoenix. Sarah wanted to come with me, but I needed to do this alone. Elena lived in a modest apartment complex on the north side of the city. When she answered the door, she looked as exhausted as I felt. Mrs. Sullivan, she said quietly, we need to talk. She nodded and let me in. The apartment was neat and decorated with a child's touch. Crayon drawings on the refrigerator, toys in a basket by the couch. Evidence of Isabella everywhere. She's at my mother's, Elena said, following my gaze. I didn't want her here for this. We sat across from each other, two women who'd loved the same man, both betrayed by him in different ways. The marriage certificate, I said without preamble. My lawyer says it's a fake. Elena's face flushed. I can explain. You were his mistress. He never divorced me. He couldn't have legally married you? I know. Elena's composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know that now. But I didn't know it then. He showed me divorce papers, told me it was finalized. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I loved him. So you faked the certificate? After he died, when I realized what he'd done to both of us, She wiped her eyes. I panicked. I thought if I showed up at the funeral as his wife, if I had proof, I could get something for Isabella. Some kind of survivor benefits, part of his pension, something. She's his daughter. She deserves... You thought you could steal my husband's legacy? Anger, hot and righteous, surged through me. Show up at his funeral and humiliate me in front of everyone I know for money? It wasn't about the money. Elena shot back. It was about my daughter having a father. It was about her knowing she existed to him, that she mattered. Do you know what it's like to explain to a 6-year-old why Daddy isn't coming home anymore? Why she can't go to his funeral? Why she has to pretend she doesn't exist? Her words hit me hard. Isabella, the innocent child in all of this. How long did you know him? I asked quietly. 9 years. He told me he was divorced, that his kids were grown, that he was lonely. I fell in love with him. We built a life together, or I thought we did. He was here every other week, and we video called every day he was traveling. I didn't question it. God, I was so stupid. No, I said firmly. You weren't stupid. You were lied to. We both were. We sat in silence for a moment. The fake certificate was wrong, I said finally, but I understand why you did it. You were desperate and scared and trying to protect your child. Elena looked up at me, surprised. Isabella is Robert's daughter, I continued. I've seen the photos. She has his eyes. My lawyer is going to look into what we can do. Survivor benefits, setting up a trust for her education. She's innocent in all this. Mrs. Sullivan, call me Maggie. I stood up. Robert betrayed us both. He lied to us both. He made choices that hurt people I love and people you love. But Isabella shouldn't suffer for his sins. Elena stood too, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. I nodded and turned to leave, but paused at the door. For what it's worth, I said, looking back at her. I don't think you're a bad person. Elena, I think you're just someone who loved the wrong man. Same as me. 6 months have passed since Robert's funeral, Sarah and Michael have slowly started processing their grief and anger. We've had family therapy sessions, long talks, and many tears. I've sold the house. Too many memories, too many lies embedded in those walls, and moved into a smaller place closer to Sarah's family. I've joined a support group for people dealing with infidelity. I've started painting again, something I gave up decades ago. Elena and I don't talk regularly, but we're in touch. Isabella's education fund is set up, with contributions from Robert's pension and life insurance. She sends me photos sometimes, birthday parties, school plays. I send gifts at Christmas. She looks like Robert. But more than that, she looks like Sarah did at that age. They're half-sisters, and someday, when Isabella is older and understands better, maybe they'll meet, or maybe not. We're all just trying to heal in our own ways, people in town still whisper. I know they do. Poor Maggie Sullivan. Her husband had a whole other family. I can see the pity in their eyes at church, at the grocery store. But here's what I've learned. Robert's betrayal doesn't define me. His lies don't make my love any less real. It just means his was complicated, selfish, and ultimately cowardly. I'm 72 years old. I have grandchildren who love me, children who support me, and friends who've rallied around me. I have breath in my lungs and years ahead of me still. Robert took a lot from me. My trust, my peace of mind, my understanding of our shared history. But he didn't take my strength. He didn't take my dignity, and he didn't take my ability to move forward. Last week, I went on my first date since Robert died, a widower from the community center named Frank. We had coffee and talked about our grandkids and our favorite books. It was nice, simple, honest. I don't know if I'll ever truly get over what Robert did. Some wounds are too deep to fully heal, but I'm learning to live with the scars, and I'm learning that life, even at 72, can still hold surprises. Even good ones. As for Robert, I've forgiven him in my own way. Not because he deserves it, but because carrying that anger was exhausting, and I have better things to do with the time I have left. I visit his grave sometimes, usually when no one else is around. I don't bring flowers. I just stand there and talk to him, telling him about the kids, about Isabella, about my life now, and every time before I leave, I say the same thing. I loved you for 50 years, Robert Sullivan. And that was real, even if you weren't always honest about who you were. But I'm done living in your shadow. The rest of my life is mine. Then I turn around, get in my car, and drive toward whatever comes. Next, because that young woman walking into the funeral, the one who claimed to be his wife, she didn't destroy my life. She freed me from a lie I didn't even know I was living, and for that, in a strange way, I'm grateful.